Yeah, it's like it will. Okay, we're alive. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So I'm with Bianca, and I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome. Welcome in
Thank
to
you
the
for
pod.
having me.
Yeah. So I'm really excited because this topic is one that's very close to my heart, going all in on your dreams. And I truly can think of nobody better to have as a guest on this episode because you are the epitome of that. You are straight up the
Oh,
epitome
thank
of
you.
that. So I'm really I'm really excited to have you here. A little bit of a backstory, just so everybody knows. So we met actually a while back. We and we have a lot in common, which it's funny because I'm like I feel like you remind me so much of me, but it's almost scary how similar. It's almost
Totally.
scary because we're from like we met in dance a long time ago. We both did like I don't want to say competitive dance, but like we were on these dance teams
Mhm.
and then we were both from Seattle and both in recruiting and then both coaches and so how we kind of dove deeper is you actually started working with me at the beginning of this year as a coaching client, which was really amazing, and we have
Yes.
had the opportunity to dive in for about 9 months or so, and just even before we started working together, I'd always just from having known you before, I knew you were somebody who was a go-getter and achiever, had a lot of aspirations and you were moving towards them. But then getting to work with you one-on-one and really see it come to life, see you just start to take it in a whole different speed. It was just really incredible. So yeah, so I'm honored. So if you wouldn't mind, just share
Oh.
us a little bit about share with us, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your background and what you do now.
Yes. Well, thank you for the intro. That is so sweet. And I appreciate, all that you've done and contributed to my journey as well. But yeah, like you were saying, come from a background of dance, been dancing ever since I can remember. And it's funny, even that team we were on together, I didn't know, anybody on that team. I just heard about it from a friend and went on a whim and just kind of put myself out there and ended up really leading to some great relationships and cool opportunities. But yeah, I just from a young age knew I wanted to be a dance teacher. And I think that was really one of the first things that opened my eyes to teaching people and coaching. And in a way, like over time, figuring out I really loved that process of, you get new students at the beginning of the year and then you see them on stage in June and you get just so emotional about how much they grow and like change. And, you know, there's a lot of layers within that as well. But I've had a really interesting journey that really non-conventional. So after high school, didn't go to college. I pursued the dance career a bit. And I think just early on realized it wasn't going to be a sustainable career path that would give me the life that I wanted. And um, went down there a lot. And I also, was young and would have had to sleep on a couch and live off of top ramen. And I was like, well, I could either start building my life now or I could start whenever this dance thing runs out. So um, from there got a handful of stable jobs that I thought, oh, since they have good insurance and 401ks, they must be the right answer. And um, tried going back to school because I kind of thought, well, if I want to be an entrepreneur, that must be the way to do it. And 2 years into schooling, realizing, I'm $1,000 in debt now, and like this is the opposite of what I thought I wanted.
Yeah.
And but you just get bombarded with everyone, from such a young age that like college is how you become successful. And so I just always didn't, since I didn't check that box, I just felt so less than all the time. And I was like, okay, I really just want to give myself that box checked. And what ended up happening for me in the middle going to school is I found personal development in a whole new way. I found coaches and started going through trainings and just really opened my eyes up to possibility in a whole new way about, I just belief systems and from there was able to really kind of level up again and say, okay, what do I really want? And so I was able to actually, at my job, I was working an office manager job so I could go to school full time, and came back and said, hey, I'm going to be leaving because I want to pursue this training and development and coaching path. And they're like, well, we don't have a training program. Like, why don't you help us coach the leadership here? And so I actually 3 or 4 years ago now got to create a program from scratch and really work with the leadership team. And, realizing that wasn't going to be sustainable because I was working with people in the restaurant industry. And what was kind of happening was I ended up working with leadership, and they kept leaving to go pursue other things because realizing that, the restaurant path wasn't for them. And so then I was like, okay, this could actually be kind of bad. Like, so
the signs.
so I was like, okay. And from there went into recruiting because, wanting to be in coaching, I just knew I needed to build more skills in outreach and sales and just getting comfortable talking to people on the phone. And, also just a way that I could increase my income and, start on a different trajectory and open up more opportunities for me that way. And so it's really been life-changing when I've been able to, invest in more coaching over the last couple of years and really just explore more opportunities within myself and be able to share that with other people. And so I know a lot of our work this year has been really building that foundation for the next level of my coaching business, which just launched my brand new program, which is really exciting and fun. And I don't know, I'm just really grateful for the year that I've had and what I've gotten to do. And I don't know if that answers your question a lot. I went a lot of different places in that description, but that's kind of what led me to the current moment.
Yeah, well, I love it. And it totally does, right? Our paths are never linear. They're never linear, and they take us in so many different directions and often back to almost like an origin place for us. So, what I loved in all of that is there seemed to be this underlying sense of knowing what the bigger picture was for you, kind of having this idea of, well, okay, so I'm going to kind of do this because it's going to lead more to this, really just diving into gaining this skill set that's going to help me over here. And something I forgot to share, I can't even believe this, right before this, we were like, okay, let's really hone in on what our, bios and things are. And I totally forgot to say, just so everybody knows, Bianca is a women's transformational coach, really honing on the career side, which is awesome because you're a recruiter right now, right? You know how to lead people up the ladder and really get to where they want to go. But what I love about it is that you're not just like, yay, women's empowerment, right? Like you have empowered your life through your journey up to this point. You have taken yourself through it all and risen above, which is amazing. So you know your shit. It's my podcast. I'll cuss if I want. You know your shit, right? You know it. And so what I think is so amazing about that is, yes, you've had this bigger sense of purpose. It sounds like through a majority of this experience. So for anybody listening that is maybe hearing that and they're like, man, I feel a million miles away from just knowing what I want to do, knowing what that thing is for me. How, if you can think back on it, how did you know like coaching was for you? How did you know like you wanted to continue, like dancing was for you? Was it just more this innate, like natural knowing, or was it you kind of had to find it? And I know this is a big question, but then also, how did you trust it when it came in?
Right. Yeah,
that was always my struggle
question.
for so long.
Yes, I love this question because I call this the discovery phase. And I know it can feel so frustrating when you identify and come to the point where you just like, where you're at isn't working, but you're like, how the hell do I get out of it?
Yeah.
And so, I think back to the very first time when I was working retail. And I've always taught dance on the side. And I kind of, had this nudge like, well, if I really had to pick something to do, I would love to teach full time. And of course, right when I had that realization, I get offered a promotion to be an AGM of a Vans retail store, which I was like 20, which thinking back is crazy. Like you're going to leave a 21-year-old in charge. But
Is that like a general manager role? Or
yeah. So it's like
okay.
right beneath. So I was a floor supervisor, and they were like, "Hey, we want to talk to you about possibly being promoted." And so I had, kind of that inner tug to say maybe explore teaching, but then, right in front of me is this promotion, it's more money. It's, you're one step away from being the manager of the whole store. And, then from there you can move up. And so I really had like what now would be considered more like professional corporate route, and then maybe the not conventional route of teaching. And I think, the big place people get stuck is like, they just want the decision right away. And so when I was in that space, I did not give an answer right away. I said, "Oh, that's great. I'd be interested in like exploring this more. Let's continue the conversation." Right. And so what I did is I just sat with it, and it was just conscious in my day to day. I would talk to people about it every single day. And I would just kind of waiting and aware for the moment where it all made sense. And I remember this specifically so well, like it was yesterday. And I happened to be going to the movies with my friends, and it was when Burlesque came out in theaters.
Oh my gosh.
And we watched the movie, and at the end of the movie, I was just like, "Oh my gosh, like I have to teach dance full time. Like that's it. Like I just have to do it." Like I just got my answer, right? But it took like several days of just being uncomfortable and just in between of saying, "Okay, well, what is really the next best thing?" And what I always tell people is if you sit with the question long enough, the answer will come. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get stuck in the in between because they just don't want to not know. And oftentimes, in this last big jump that I made, another thing I always suggest is just talking to people about it all the time. Like, bring it up to people. The more you put voice into it, the more you can process it. But also, you might get your answer by something somebody says or somebody, repeats back to you. It might come to be just more clear that way. But I always just say, talking to people a lot about where you're at. There's so many free resources on Google too. So if you're like, wanting to make a career change, I always say like type in free career quiz. Like it's kind of fun, and it'll
Ooh.
give you a list of suggestions at the end, and you can kind of click on them and research them. And then it actually can help you rule out what you don't want to do as well, which I think is
Yeah.
really equally important. And especially because you might think of something, and like for recruiting, you might think you want to be a recruiter and then look at all the bullet points and be like, "Oh, actually, that's not what I want to do at all. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't sound like fun." And so it can be a way to kind of get traction and just be like, "Oh, I want to look more into this thing, this other thing." And so there's a lot of different ways to explore it, but you can also leverage the relationships you already have. Ask them like what they look for in employees, what they think you'd be good at. I worked in a restaurant. A lot of my regulars were corporate, worked for Amazon. I asked them like, "Hey, like, what do you think I'd be good at?" And a lot of people said sales or recruiting. And so I was like, "Oh,
Wow.
interesting. Why?" I'd ask everyone from my mom to my customers to my best friends, and just ask them like, "Oh, what do you feel like my top strengths are?" Because honestly, I was trying to discover them. When I was stuck, I was like, "What am I good at?" Like, I have no idea. So
Yeah.
that was a really good way for me to start getting the ball rolling. And, LinkedIn is another great free resource. Like, start living on
YouTube
LinkedIn.
University.
Yes, yes. So LinkedIn is great for to organically grow your network too, and just start seeing what people in different industries are up to.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, this is honestly genius. And it's something I wish I had thought about back in the day, because how many times are we sitting there stressing and struggling about what do we do? What do we do? Because we can't see our own blind spots. So the fact that you had honestly the courage and the bravery in a place where you're like, "Hey, I'm not necessarily where I want to be. I'm trying to figure this out."
Right.
and still vocalize it to your network and just people you didn't even know coming in, and or maybe you knew them a little bit, right, if they're your regulars, so never mind. But asking them, hey, what do you see in me? What is it maybe that I'm missing, right? Taking that little bit of bold step to gain some clarity, right, to bring some new perspective on your situation, which I think is incredible. But yeah, it's awesome too. There are so many resources, right? There's even I recently went and played with 16personalities.com, I think it is. And you can do a test to see what your, I don't know, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like
Oh,
ENJ
cool.
or,
Yeah.
whatever. And
There's so
it'll give
many.
you,
Yeah.
in like 10 minutes, it'll give you a whole analysis of yourself. And one of the things that will pop in is like, which career would you be best in? What types of careers, would you be best in? And so it's really
Yes.
interesting to like take the time, learn about yourself, and not just do it intrinsically, right? Like ask people, connect
Totally.
with people. And it's funny, I think about like when I started my business, something I don't tell a lot of people is that before I even had a business idea, I made one up that I thought sounded good because I was at an entrepreneurship conference and I was the only one that didn't have a business, and I was feeling really not good about myself, but I knew I didn't want to be in corporate forever. And I kind of came up with an idea of a business that had been lingering on my heart a little bit, but I hadn't solidified anything. And what gave me the confidence to really just start taking action was I actually shared the idea outwardly to see, does anybody have any interest in this? Am I like sounding
Right.
crazy, or does it sound good? And everybody was like, yeah, girl, that's amazing. And it wasn't fake either. I knew it wasn't just them like, like
Yeah.
building me up just to make me feel good. It was super genuine. They're asking me questions. They're like, oh my gosh, like, what's your process? And I was still making stuff up on the spot. But when I got home, I was like, cool, I guess I just workshopped a business, right? Sometimes
Right.
just sharing outwardly these things and you can get so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am so passionate about that, and I can't stress it enough. And I think why people don't do that is like for two reasons. A, they're scared for people to ask them about it again. They're like
Yeah.
kind of on the line now that you're on the line for it now, right? But
Yeah.
it's like also like people are scared to change their mind. So they're like, they feel like, oh, if I say like, hey, I'm thinking about going into sales. Like, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think I should do if I'm trying to get into sales? And you're talking to someone in sales on advice. And then as you get into it, you realize, actually, I don't want to be in sales. But now, like, I told 5 different people and I asked 5 different people what I should do. And now, like, I feel married to this idea because, like, I said it out loud. And
Yeah.
it's so empowering when you give yourself permission to change your mind and say, oh, now that I have more information, I can shift accordingly. And it's not to say
Mm.
you're ping ponging all over the place. It's to say you were on this road and on this path and you realized it wasn't for you and you chose another path instead of just going down that road of going into sales and years down the line just being finally so unhappy and fed up that you're like have to leave. It's like, no, let's change that now. It's totally okay to change your mind. And I think that's something that a lot of people get stuck on because they it's totally understandable to be scared. And I am such a firm believer in building a community of people you trust. And, maybe it starts with one person and over time you build it. But I always empower people to say, like, it's okay to change your mind.
Yeah, well, this leads perfectly into the next thing I wanted to bring up is that I would love to know from you, what do you think are some misconceptions about what like having a big dream are, like maybe dreaming big? I know one of the things I feel like can happen is, like you were saying, people get so like married to this idea that
Yeah.
if any part of it, doesn't necessarily go as a plan, they just kind of sometimes it can be easy to just like drop it and be like, you know what,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't for me, instead of
Mhm.
honoring the pivot, that maybe step that didn't go as planned was actually all it was supposed to be a step to take you where you're meant to go. Right. So I'm just curious
Absolutely.
if people have heard any misconceptions, or have seen people maybe trying to go for big dreams, but then they stop themselves because they think it's actually supposed to look like this thing over here,
Right.
but it's not that at all.
Well, I think a huge thing is being open to possibility. I I see a lot of like it doesn't make sense on paper, like so how can
Yeah.
this work, right? It comes back down to the belief. And so this was huge when I was making this last transition almost 2 years ago now. And when I got this job, I was like, okay, I have a formula that works, because like this is a 6-figure job I have zero experience in, no college degree, and in the middle of a pandemic. And so I think a lot of it comes down to belief, and believing no matter what's on paper doesn't have to make sense, that it's possible. And the reality behind that is when you have to be willing to put in the work to make it possible. It's not like, oh,
Yeah.
it's not this foo-foo idea. It's like, okay, this is what I want. I believe in my heart and my soul it can happen. I don't know how, but I'm willing to do what it takes. Like that whole journey of me leaving the restaurant industry as a trainer and coming into corporate as a recruiter, like, I mean, it took a couple months of just, every day doing something small towards it. But in my day-to-day, I started showing up to my current role as if I would if I was making a 6-figure job, or how would I act, and, as a business professional. And in my day-to-day, I really saw it and I believed it. And everything I did, I came from a place of what would I be doing if I was like a 6-figure corporate woman in this scenario. And I see what I see is just like the belief, right? And I think that that's just such a great place to start. And you can start building that in your day-to-day. It doesn't have to be, this huge career jump like me, but I think that the possibility is a huge one that's changed my life when I started really opening up my world to saying, like, this doesn't make sense on paper right now, but I know it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's massive. And I'm just like, yes, you're amazing. I'm so like, just so proud of you. I think it's so cool. You really have shown up in such big ways. It's really cool to hear you talk about this and be like, I don't want to say matter of fact, but just very much like, this is just kind of how you move towards it, right? It's so tangible. It's so like real world. And for anybody that's wanting to be more like that, right? They're like, gosh, I want to be like that. I just feel like I'm in my own way. Like, what are some maybe ideas, and I know I'm kind of catching you on the spot here.
Yes,
But
no, I love it.
What are some ideas, maybe suggestions or tips you would give somebody who's hearing you and like, man, she's so inspiring, right? Other than hiring her, hello, she's a coach. I'll put her information below. We're going to plug your programs for sure. But besides that, what would be some tips you would give somebody to just kind of dive deeper into their mindset to start building that belief to then show up different?
Fully. I mean, first of all, I would ask, what does your day-to-day look like? And what are some of the things that you're consuming? Social media is a huge one. I mean, I recently just did this a few months ago again, because I was, going through a slump and I wanted to feel more inspired. And I mean, who are you following? What are you looking at? Is it inspiring? Like, I'm straight up muted everything on my Instagram unless it was coaches. I'm kind of into like some Jesus stuff. So I like, faith-based stuff. And like, I literally muted everything on my social media except those accounts. So that's what I'm seeing. I think, there's a lot of resources that it can be kind of daunting and overwhelming, but it's like, you just got to push play on one. You just got to push play. And I used to be like really caught up in, well, like, I just want to hear the right one and I don't want to waste my time listening to the wrong podcast. Open your mind to, you're going to get something out of it no matter what. And you're going to learn. And, maybe you don't listen to that person again, but I'm sure in a 30-minute podcast, there's something you can take away. But, I think reaching out for support is a huge one. I mean, when you're stuck in a career or anything, when I was making the shift 2 years ago, I asked other people in corporate, what do you suggest that I do? What's a good next step? And so I think definitely paying attention to the people you're around, the content you're consuming. I mean, this, especially if you're more highly sensitive person and you're an empathic, even what are you doing right before you go to bed? What kind of TV shows are you watching? Did they like kind of make your nervous system fluttery, and all these things can play into a noisy consciousness and just ultimately be distracting and really confusing. So the more you can just fill your cup with like uplifting content, find the people you relate to on podcasts, on social media, and the people you relate to in your life. Like, I'm such a firm believer in just even your friendships saying like, hey, just speaking into it can help so much.
Yeah, I love everything you just shared. Oh my gosh, there's so much. I'm like, people go back and rewind to the beginning of that because there's so much goodness there. Because what I love is that you're really suggesting, be so aware of yourself, right? Build a new relationship with yourself that you can start to tune in and say, how are things making my body feel? How do I feel when I'm consuming that, right? Not being so on autopilot, but being willing to take a step back and realize you actually get to control this. Your mindset, something that hit me really hard one day was I realized, my mindset wasn't something that was happening to me. That's what I thought it was. I thought I was trapped by my stories, trapped by,
Yeah.
my kind of mild depression state that I was in. I thought I was trapped by that. But when I paused enough to tune in to see, oh, how things make me feel and, maybe I can change that, it started giving me my power back, right? And so like you're
Yeah.
saying, like as much as it can feel like, we are in our way, is as much as you can actually create that change, right? You are the source. So if
Yeah.
things are happening, where you feel like it's kind of taking over, it's like, no, you can change that. You can turn that
Yeah.
around for yourself. You just have to be willing to show up a little bit different. So like you're saying,
Absolutely.
it's like, well, okay, well, what can you control, right? And you can control the amount of social media you take in or the type of content you're taking in
Right.
those moments, or like you said, like your morning and evening routines, because they your bookends greatly impact your day. So, and they can help you make better decisions for yourself if you're showing up even just more consciously in those times. So I love that. I think that's super powerful and gives people a really nice tangible place to start. I think that's one of my favorite things about your coaching is like you're so tangible with it, right? You're just so like,
Oh, thank
I'm not
you.
just going to give you fluff, right? You're like,
Yeah.
here's the problem. Here's a thing you can do, an actual thing you can walk away with and do to create that change, which is super
Oh.
powerful.
Well, I love everything you just said too, and I mean, it's so powerful, the mindset and what you said about like it happening to you.
Yeah.
And another like that kind of reminded me of something else too, where you can bring your awareness to what's going right, and like some of those basics. I think I place such a high value on happiness, and so I think a lot of the work I do is around just what makes me happy. And when you start bringing more awareness, like you were saying, just to what is working, what makes you happy, you can start building more off of that. So it's like, even if it's a warm cup of coffee in the morning, the next time you have a warm cup of coffee, you're like, oh, I'm doing this because like it brings me joy. It's not just like, oh, I need the caffeine, it's like a present moment. And I think those are the moments that like ultimately compound and make such a big difference in your life.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. And it's so easy to underestimate the power of the compound
Oh
because
my gosh,
it
yes.
re- it requires patience and, like you're saying, belief, right? That it's doing something. I will tell you for so long. Like for example, I was meditating because I knew I was like, well, that's what all the gurus are doing. That's
Yeah.
what everybody says works. So I'm going to do it. And this was at the start of my journey. So we've come pretty far. But I used to literally meditate for like a year. Nothing was happening because I was doing it to get something, right? And it was like the
Right.
moment I finally let go of doing it with, this intention of needing to receive. It was
Mm.
just being and having just surrendering and letting go. That's when stuff started changing, opportunities starting coming in. I started to get more clarity, right? So, so I guess that was a little bit of a rabbit hole, but the compound of doing things,
Right.
consistently over time, if you look back a week later, a month later, you won't even recognize your life if you're dedicated enough to just doing something with the intention of, I just want more joy. Because
Mhm.
truthfully, that's why we want anything, right? Is we think it's going to make
Oh
us
my
feel
gosh,
better.
right? Right.
Yeah. So if you're just like, okay, well, I just want to experience more joy, and that's the intention, and you're like, okay, I'm dedicated to joy. Because how many times do us as people in the life have that as a goal? Never. So it's just amazing how much it can change your life when you just decide that's a goal, right? And you put that as a priority. So I think it's really cool that you kind of shifted and were like, yeah, this is a focus, right? And came back to that, and look what it's created in your life. Look how much you've created. Like, I don't want to underestimate or bypass the fact that you literally change your entire life in like a very quick amount of time. Moved from Seattle to Arizona, right? Like you started to build your dream business. You're thriving in your career. You've let go of like relationships that weren't serving you on a few different levels, right? And you've come into yourself more. And this is such a what are the words I'm looking for? Like what's the word? It's gonna hit me later. I'm gonna like re-listen to this and be like, that was the word, duh. But it's just shows, right, the power of going all in, of saying, you know what, I deserve better, being willing to say, okay, even if I don't know if this is working or if I'm going to be able to achieve A, B, and C, at the end of the day, I know that I deserve better. So I'm going to give myself the opportunity to try, and seeing where that leads you. And gosh, what is the word? I guess epitome of it, but like you really just show like when you go all in, magic can happen. And I don't mean magic in the sense of just like, oop, I did nothing and I manifested everything. Yeah, because I don't think anybody that's done anything great has just been sitting on their couch eating grapes and manifested, their dream life. You gotta take a line action. But you're just you're showing that when you show that you're worthy to yourself, that you're worthy, and you start taking one step in front of the other, and you do things simply because you're like, I deserve to feel better. It's amazing what can come in that's aligned, and then starts to allow this feeling of belief to really sink into our bodies. And so then it becomes easier, right, to then feel like, okay, I can believe it before I see it. So I'm going to come up with that word. It's going to hit me, but yeah. So I guess I would love to know from you too, because when we're talking about going all in, right, that can mean something different to everybody. So for you, because I just feel like you have just nonstop been like this woman on a mission, going for it, creating your dreams. So how would you say you've defined going all in this journey that's made you say, yeah, this is for me. I deserve this. Like, I'm going forward and like creating that.
I love that question. For me, it feels like full alignment. It feels like having the hard conversations, facing the reality, even when it's tough, right? Like, I think going all in means like also leaning in to leaning into the process, to the journey. And like, that comes with some uncomfortability. And I think, I don't want to mess this up. The growth happens when like you have the awareness and you do something, you choose different, right? So going all in, it's like, I think people get this perception of like you're just jumping off a cliff and it's like, this huge risky thing. But I think like going all in just means like stop doing the things that don't serve you, like, and go all into the things that do. Like, that can look, you can do that tomorrow, and it's like, it starts with building it at, I think, a smaller level, like getting practical too on like, how can I incorporate this in my day to day? Like going all in at work, like practice that feeling of like showing up 100% no matter what. And no matter what happens that day, like, how am I going to respond to that? Let that be like, okay, now I'm only going to give 50% because Sally was mean to me on the phone. Like, it's like, no, I'm going to go all in. So Sally was mean to me. Okay. Like, let's move forward. Or like, I'm going to pray for Sally, or like, we can work, we'll circle back to this after work hours and go all in on hitting my pillow and getting my anger out. Okay. So
Sally's in some pain. She needs some love.
Yeah. And which, by the way, is easier sometimes than others. Sometimes I'll be like, we're going to revisit this one after work. But, think, man, going all in is just showing up 100% like to every area. And that includes taking care of yourself. That includes like not doing the things that you know aren't getting you closer to what you want. And
Yeah.
it's giving yourself grace. Going all in, it requires so much grace. And I think like I can't stress enough just starting on the things in your day to day that are uncomfortable, just stretching a little bit. Like that for me, literally used to be liking and commenting on people's Instagram. That used to be like
Yeah.
out of my comfort zone and stretch me. Like I'm not even kidding. Like I would send a comment and be like, oh my gosh, like everyone's gonna see that. Like everyone in the world, like it's
Right.
you where people get I think a little over I don't want to keep saying stuck or just caught in their mind. It's like if you were decided you want to be a bodybuilder, like you're not just gonna go day one pick up 100 pounds. Like you're gonna go start with the weight that you can pick up, the 5 and 10 pound dumbbells, and you're gonna build that muscle until it's strong enough to lift the heavy weights. And I think like our emotions, our dreams, our goals, like they have to be the same. Like if you decide today you want to be a doctor and that's what you're called to do, like you got to know, like you got to start at step one and sign up for school. Like you're not going to
Mm.
tomorrow just be a doctor out of nowhere. Like, but if you know why you're on that journey and you want to do that, like the work and the journey to get there is always worth it. You're going to do the things necessary if you want the outcome, but start with what makes sense. Like and reach out for support. Like I'm such a firm believer in leaning on your community, leaning on your tribe. I'm a firm believer in coaching, but
Yeah.
it's just like you don't have to go tomorrow and jump off a 50-foot bridge if that if that to you feels like risky and stretching out of your comfort zone. Like it's like what's something just today that like, oh, maybe I would like avoid that person in the hall. Maybe today I walk by them. Oh, maybe I'm like scared to say hi in the elevator, but today I say, hey, have a good day. Those little things add up. Doing that consistently every day for a week, you're going to build your confidence. And,
Yeah.
confidence comes from consistency. And so when you go to the 50-foot bridge and you're like, oh my gosh, and you get there and you're like, there's no way in hell I'm jumping off of this. It's discouraging. It's so like disheartening. And you think maybe I'm just like meant to be on the ground. Maybe I'm not meant to jump. Instead of going, okay, first I'm going to jump off a 10-foot bridge. That felt scary. I'm going to practice doing that until that feels good. Okay. I'm going to go to now I'm ready for a 15. Okay. I'm feeling pretty good. Now I think I'm ready to jump to a 30. Your way up, to the 50-foot bridge. You don't just go 0 to 100. I just don't think it's sustainable. There are people that are wired that way, and that's great. I think the majority of us aren't. And so it's like, what makes sense to start building that muscle in your day to day where you can start working that confidence, that consistency. And like, I really believe that can be as simple as looking someone in the eye and smiling at a stranger.
And that's scary enough. But I love what you're saying here. These are such good, tangible things because and they make so much sense because even though stuff like that, it's like, okay, I get it. Like, yeah, the scary bridge, right? But like doing it with something like entrepreneurship where there's no clear path for how to do it. And there's no like guarantee that it's going to do like that you're going to be successful. There's zero guarantee, right? It's like it feels like a giant risk all the time. So it makes sense why the fear, is there. It makes sense why sometimes it is hard to move. But yeah, like the consistency is really what it's about. It's funny. I remember when I started this journey, I just followed so many like masculine entrepreneurs. And so I was always very much like, if you have a plan B, you don't really have a plan A and you don't really care about your dreams. So like go all in. So when I heard that, that's literally when I like rebuilt my life or destroyed it first. So I literally,
Right.
I quit my cushy cushy 6-figure job. I sold everything and like I got rid of my car and I moved from Seattle to Austin, Texas. And I like had nothing. except for the business idea that I had just made up a few months prior, and it was just like, who did I think I was? But I, and that's when I realized that's not necessarily what going all in means. Sometimes going all
Right.
in is just showing up for yourself a little bit every single day, not feeling like you have to screw yourself over in the process, but meeting yourself where you're at and saying, you know what,
Absolutely.
today I'm gonna try this little thing that gives me a little bit of fear, right? But the more that you can pick something to do consistently that gives you a little bit of that feeling where you're like, hey, I'm not gonna die from like commenting, but like I really don't know that I want to do this, right? But it's like I know that it would be really good for me, right? You can kind of have those
Right.
senses about it. And the more that you can just do that a little bit, the more you just change your association to that thing being scary. You change your association to fear, and you become more willing to try, become more willing to go for it. And then you're, before you know it, like you said, right, you're building this trust within yourself that, oh, I've got myself, I can show up, and I can,
Yeah.
even when I'm scared, I've got myself. And then before you know it, you are confident because you're like, man, I got this. And something kind of cool that I learned recently is that fear, like whenever you, or excuse me, the reward system in our brain rewards us the same, whether it's a small fear that we overcome, like commenting on something or smiling at a
Mhm.
stranger. It's the same amount of reward in the brain as if we did something really, really big.
Oh,
So if,
interesting. I love that.
yes, so so even small, sometimes when we're like, oh, all I did was like this small little thing. No, you get just as much reward in your body and your nervous system and your confidence, battery, as if you did something major. So it's worth celebrating. It's so worth
Right.
celebrating.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's so worth celebrating. And so, it's not to take these things lightly and to see that, just kind of to bring it back, right? The power of compounding on these little
Mm.
things every single day can take you so, so far. So yeah, so this is so juicy. I love it.
Yeah, I love
Um, so Miss Lady, I would love to know just a couple more questions for you. Is Who do you think you would be if you hadn't taken the risks that you've taken? If you were, think back on like
it.
that job at
Mhm.
Vans, right? You said it was Vans, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you had just said, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to keep going with this management role, because what's interesting is as we are, as we're receiving abundance in our life, right? Abundance of opportunities, the abundance of the other stuff of our current life sometimes rises as well. So we
Mm.
just get this flood of abundance, and it becomes really hard sometimes to just full on go for our dreams, because we're like, oh, well, it's abundant over here, so I don't actually need to move. So
Right.
just the fact that you were able to say, no, I'm going to have this, I'm going to have some discernment. What I really want is more of this. And you took a little bit of a risk instead of staying where it was growing abundantly too. So sometimes that happens. But if you had stayed there, right, and not like continued following your path, who do you think you would be to this day?
Hmm. It's so interesting. I, in so many ways, can see how I could have settled in that life and maybe moved up the retail chain. It's just interesting how that was such a defining moment in my life where I really like it was really the first time I heard something and got the clarity and acted on it. And it was so worth it, 100% worth it. And yeah, if I didn't, I can't even imagine, because that was just so many like layers ago. That was like 12 years ago. So it's
Right?
like
You're
to
like,
think
I was a
about
whole different
all of
person.
those moves that I've made since then, I just can't even imagine. And we didn't really like get into the specific part of my story, but I lost one of my best friends in my junior year of high school. And one of the things that I took away from that scenario was like really not taking life for granted. And that's been a really huge motivator for me. Oprah always says like all death reminds us of life. And
Mm.
I know that's kind of like a dark way to go about it, but I've actually lost two other best friends of mine since then. So I think this idea that like life is long, and like it's meant to be lived to our full potential. And that doesn't have to mean you go out tomorrow and you change everything about your life. It just means like prioritizing what really makes you happy and what really gets you out of bed in the morning and makes you feel like you can't wait to run into your life. And it's one of those things where it's inspired me to leave nothing left unsaid, to love people hard, and to really integrate that. And all that to say, I just think that like I've done so many weird things and moved jobs for whatever, for insurance and for 401k, and like
Yeah.
what my parents told me to do, and that was what I thought was best for me at that time. And do I think that was quote unquote the right answer? No. Like if I were to look back, like, but it all led me to this moment. And I, going all in on your dreams can change. It's allowed to, it's supposed to, it should. If you're learning and growing at each level of your life, like going in on your dreams is going to look differently. And I don't know. I think that like it just makes me smile in my heart to just think about like going all in your dreams. Just is possibility. It's endless possibility. Knowing a year from now, I'm going to have completely, totally different dreams. Earlier this year, I
Yes.
had a dream of singing on stage. Like that wasn't like, like it can look in so many different ways. Like it can be trying something new. It's just endless possibilities.
Wow. You inspire me greatly. I'm so glad that you brought a little bit bigger perspective to this in. And I think anybody that's great at their craft, I think of any of the legendary coaches I've ever listened to, or the people that are just so inspirational in what they do, even if they're not a coach, it's something else. They have such a grip on their mortality and
Mhm.
the truth, right? They're not in denial of it. And they're inspired, to live every day in their fullness, and that allows them to take risks and feel
Mhm.
less scared by it, right? So,
Mhm.
having that perspective in your life, and I'm so sorry that you had to have such a perspective directly as you have, but look how it's allowing you to just live, right? To live
Absolutely.
and be full out, right? And not just full out and going full speed in your dreams, but full out and honoring yourself. That's a big
Mm,
part of what this is, right? I know sometimes saying
absolutely.
like all in on your dreams can sound so hokey, but it's all in on you, right? So when
Absolutely.
you're so honoring your emotions, honoring
Mm,
your feelings, honoring like that, I'm freaking stoked and I don't even know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna go, right? Like just whatever comes up, it's like, yes, right? That's who I am today. That's who I'm being. And knowing, just like you beautifully said, nothing is fixed. Nothing is
mm,
fixed. You can pivot whenever you want. It's just, but you'll know, I always tell people, I'm like, when you can handle the pivots of life easier when you've got trust within yourself, and you know that you're safe, and you can hear when it's time to pivot.
mhm.
I've always been very good at hearing that, I think, because I'm an intuitive.
Yeah.
But I've always known like, oh, okay, it's probably time for me to start switching gears, time to, right? But
Yeah.
anybody can tune in, right? But it just makes it so much easier when you are tuned in, asking yourself the big questions, having a
Mhm.
bigger why, connected to more than just yourself, getting some perspective on what this all is. So
Mm.
I'm so glad you took it here, and
Mm,
you shared that with us, because so many people, I'm sure, feel that,
yeah.
and have experienced that. But maybe it's like causing more pain than inspiration. So you are just an absolute role model, an absolute inspiration, and I just can't wait to see where you go from here. It's literally
Oh,
a
thank
beginning,
you.
a beginning. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, before we go, I would love to know, any words of wisdom, right? Any words of wisdom with the ladies that you have, maybe last thoughts that if you were sitting in front of somebody right now who is listening to this, they're so inspired and they just like could use some love or anything, what would you
Mhm.
share with
Well, first of all, you're beautiful.
We cannot hear
Uh,
that enough as women, I
yes,
swear.
I agree. Like, oh, you're so, so beautiful. And whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're going through, whether it be at work, with your family, your finances, nothing you've gone through is something that has only happened to you. Like there's always somebody else that has been there. You are so not alone. And it is completely normal to feel the way you're feeling. Like I want everyone to just know, like whatever is going on in their mind, whatever crazy emotions they might have, like your emotions and your feelings are not wrong. They do not define you. They are just those. They're just thoughts and feelings. And I feel like the greatest gift I can just give to anyone is just to let them know they're loved and that like they're normal. They're not what their mind or their emotions or any labels that people put on you. You don't have to accept those to be true. And you are totally capable of having a life beyond your wildest dreams. Trust me. If I can do it, like all I did was lean into the hard times and be open to learning. That's it. And I don't give up.
Gosh, mic drop. I'm like, we could have just cut that and that's the episode.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Well, these are just things that
God.
have changed my life. And I think that it's like other people have given those gifts to me. And that's like my dream is to give that gift to other people.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I'm so excited for where you're going as a coach. You're so wise and such a light, and the women you work with are so blessed. So share
Oh,
with us
thank
also. I'm
you.
like, wait, another
You're
question,
so
another question, another
sweet.
question. So of course, I'm gonna in the show notes there will be lots of information on how you can connect with Bianca and her coaching, and also her socials, and just just dive into her world, right? But if you want to share any exciting programs you have really quick, or any upcoming things you're bringing to the world, let us know.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you for asking. Well, I have Instagram. I'm very, very active on Instagram, Bianca_Jean. But if you want to just go to my website, Bianca Jean Coaching, like blue jeans, JEAN. So
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
BiancaJeanCoaching.com. Um, and that has my link to my Instagram as well. But you can also just schedule a time to chat one-on-one, just free, see if it makes sense to work together. I just launched my breakthrough program, which is really going through the phases that I've found help me release my past and really, like we were talking about earlier, open my mind to possibility and creating a life that is full of my wildest dreams. And so I kind of created more of that emotional side of things. And that's also available to chat through, and a couple different ways to go about working together as well. So yeah.
Amazing. So amazing. Well, I'm super proud of you. I'm so excited about everything you're creating. And oh my gosh, like it's beautiful. So thank you for being
Aww.
on today. It was
Thank
amazing
you
having
so
you.
much for having me. Oh my gosh, I was stoked. I've been looking forward to this. So
Me too. Me too. I'm like, how have we not done this sooner? We'll probably have you back. So don't worry.
yes, anytime.
Yay.